Yes, so hello everyone again. So I'll be also in this presentation and with my colleague Thomas.
Hello.
So welcome to Unlock the Power of the AL Extensions toolset, where we will give you a detailed overview of the AL code, debugging and navigation. So for today's agenda, we have, So we're going to look at three main things. First up, it's troubleshooting. So we will look at the different debugging capabilities that we offer as part of the AL extension. So not so much as, for example, the in-client tools. We will also look, of course, at the AL Explorer, which we have already seen before, since it's an important aspect for navigation and exploration of your code. And last of all, we will look at all of those productivity boosters that we will have also as part of the AL extension, and how to use them to be more proactive and efficient. So first up is troubleshooting. So for this section, we will first look at the overview of the debugging capabilities that we have. And then we will focus a bit more on regular debugging. As we saw before, there are quite a few improvements to regular debugging, so we will go through all of this. And then we also go a bit deeper into how to debug the different type of sessions and on the breakpoints that we support. If you want to have a broader overview of all the troubleshooting capabilities that we have in Business Central, then there's a session last year, also at TechDays, that you can check out. But let's get started with the debugging overview capabilities. So broadly speaking, we have two types of debugging. We have regular debugging and snapshot debugging. Many of you, or most of you, are probably familiar with regular debugging. This is the kind where you set the breakpoints in your code, and then when the code execution hits those breakpoints, then you can inspect the variables live, and so on. Whereas snapshot debugging, it's a bit different. You need to set the snap points ahead of time. Then you initiate the debugging session, then the code executes, no breakpoints are hit, and then you can, once the session has ended, then you can replay that session, and then you can inspect the variables. So these two types have very different capabilities that you need to be familiar with, so you know what can each type do and what can they not. So the most important difference is that regular debugging only supports sandbox environments, whereas snapshot debugging supports both sandbox and production. So of course, if you have production environment, then use the snapshot debugging to troubleshoot it. Then launch debugging. So with that, I mean pressing F5, that launches the browser, and you can start debugging. That's only supported with regular debugging. Attached to the next session of a given type. This is also supported on both types of debugging. Attached to an existing session, given its ID, also supporting both. Note that these are also recent additions for regular debugging. Attached to a next session for a given user, also supporting both. Debug a session belonging to another user, also supporting both. So again, if you want to debug another user's, another developer, a customer session, then you don't have to reproduce it from scratch. Then you can just debug that existing session without having to start from scratch. Real-time control, so this means being able to, as code is executed, being able to inspect your variables, to pause, tape over, set more breakpoints, and so on. This is only supported in regular debugging, not in snapshot, because of course, as it can run in production, you don't want to stop your code as it's running. Profiling information, so if you want to see the performance profiling information, this is only supported in snapshot debugging. And then replaying the debug session, this is only supported in snapshot debugging, so being able to replay that scenario all over again through the snapshot file, that's only with snapshot debugging. All right, so that was it for the capabilities. And because of this, we also want to use regular debugging and snapshot debugging in different scenarios. So for regular debugging, it's very good while you're actively developing your extension. It's because, again, if you want these traditional debug controls of being able to inspect, set breakpoints, and so live, this is very good for that. And also allows for faster publishing. Because here, for example, when you launch, you publish the application, so you can already start debugging, whereas in Snapshot, you have to first publish it, like upload it and then deploy it, and that takes a bit longer. So in general, if you are working with a sandbox environment, then you want to use regular debugging because it's more powerful than snapshot debugging. And then for snapshot debugging, a very obvious one is that if you have a production environment, then you have to use snapshot debugging. If you also need performance profiling information, snapshot debugging. And also if you want to share the debug results of a session, use snapshot debugging. You can also share that snapshot file with other users, so they can also take a look at that debugging session. All right, so that was it for the two main types of debugging. Now let's look a bit deeper into regular debugging. And as we saw before, there are three ways of regular debugging a session. So you can launch your own session. You can attach to an existing session, or you can attach to the next session, or you can attach to an existing session. So many of you have already debugged in VS Code, but in BC SaaS it's a bit different because the user is in one machine, but the session you want to debug is another machine. So let's see a bit of this magic that's going behind the scenes and how it works for each of the types. So if you're debugging your own BC online session, then in that case, you go to VS Code, you press F5, initiate that debugging session, and the cluster balancer will find a node where to initiate that debugging context. And then the browser will be launched, and then the cluster balancer will direct that request to the node where the debugging is taking place. When you are attaching to an existing session, it's a bit different, because in this case, we already have an existing session running on one of the nodes. So in this case, when you launch an existing session and attach to an existing session requesting VS Code, then you need the ID of that session. Then the cluster balancer with this ID will search which one of the nodes has this session. And then once it finds it, then it will direct that request to the node. And last of all, if we want to attach to the next session, then also VS Code will send the request. The cluster balancer will find a node. And then the node will wait 10 minutes for a session of that type to be initiated. So when there's a session of that type initiated, then the cluster balancer will hopefully find that node and then initiate that debugging session there. All right, so again, these three different types of debugging session also have different capabilities. So if you want to target a session belonging to another user, then you use attach to next or attach to existing. If you want to target an existing session, then use attach to existing. If you want to publish the extension before debugging, this is also only possible with launch debugging. You can debug web client sessions with all the different types, and this is something also new for attach to next. You can also debug non-web client sessions, but this is usually want to go with attach to next if you want to debug service-to-service calls. You can also do that with attach to existing, but it's a bit trickier getting hold of the ID. So in this case, use attach to next. Then only with launch, you can specify the startup option of object ID and object types. So when you launch the browser, then it will initiate, it will open that object, so you can start debugging. And then launch and attach to next are available for versions of BC, and attach to existing is something that we have added from BC 22. Okay, so when do you want to use each type of debugging a session? So launch a session is best suited when you're actively developing the changes. Yeah, you can quickly launch it, and then you can see and inspect those variables. Also, it publishes it before you launch it. So again, it's already published, you can already start debugging. And it's very powerful if you use RAD, because it's way faster. This is because it only computes the differences. So use RAD if you have already done a full publish. Then attach to next, you usually want to use this when you debug a non-web client session. So the majority of the time, this is when you are debugging a service-to-service calls. This is also the only way you can debug, install, and upgrade code units. And also, again, there's this 10-minute timeout on how long this will wait for the session. If we exceed that timeout, then the debug session will be aborted. And finally, attach to existing. Use attach to existing if you want to target an already existing session. So again, if you are very close to doing something and finding the problem, and you don't want to reproduce it from scratch, or you also can have another user who can reproduce that issue, then you can attach to that existing session either your own or another user session. Yeah, and how you specify this, you use this, you can start this through different configurations in the launch.json file. For launch, it looks something like this. The most important part is that request is sent to launch. Then you can specify the startup object type and ID. And also the tenant is quite important. If the tenant is not on your ADD, then you can debug another tenant if you're delegated admin. And you can also use one of our snippets. You don't have to memorize this by heart. For attach to next, the request is set to attach. Then the most important part is that breakpoint next, which defines the type of session you want to attach next. So it can be web service client, a background session, or a web client. And you can also specify the user ID of the user you want to attach to the next session. And also we have a snippet that you can use for this. And finally, attached to existing, here the important part is to specify the session ID, which you can do through this parameter. Okay, so that was quite a lot of theory. Now let's look at a demo in action. So let me show you how you can debug another user session. So let's start by starting here, my web client on a user. So I'm connected as Alex Wilber. And I will go to customers and find a customer card. And here I want to try this new extension that just adds a field membership number. So I will type something here, and okay, I see an error. So not sure what's going on because the message is not very descriptive. So I will go here to help and support. I will find the session ID. I'll copy that, and then I will send that to my developer or my partner. Right? So now I'm going to be the partner. So I'm doing a bit of role playing here. But as the partner, I'm going to go to VS Code. I'm going to start an attach configuration. And here I just need to specify the session ID. So I will plug that there. All right, and now that I'm done with that, then I can start the debugging session. So debug the publish. And then I will go to attach. One important aspect about this is that the user that you are going to do the debug request has the permission attach debug, otherwise it won't be able to do so. So in this case, I'm connected as I'm logged in as the administrator. Oops, not that one, that one. Yes, and you will see here that I am already attached to something. So if I'm here, the customer, I will try to reproduce that so we can troubleshoot it. And once I enter that, then I will see my VS Code that we have actually hit the breakpoint of the session. So you can start to see what's going on. So yeah, that was quite useful to do that. So now let's look back into the breakpoints, which you, of course, want to use for any debugging session. So we support regular breakpoints, but we also support more advanced breakpoints. We have conditional breakpoints and implicit breakpoints. So conditional breakpoints are very straightforward. You just set a breakpoint in your code. You right-click. Then you go to edit breakpoint. And here you enter the expression. So if this expression evaluates to true, then we will hit the breakpoint. Otherwise, it won't be hit. Then implicit breakpoints, these are a bit special. So these are for specific scenarios where we can break without having to explicitly specify breakpoints for each of the cases. And in this case is when we have errors or when we modify records. And we do this using these two settings, these two parameters in the launch JSON configuration, so we can put break on error. So this parameter specifies what to do when it encounters an error. You can set it to all to break for all of the errors. You can set it to exclude try if you want to exclude those errors within a try function because you are already handling them in some way. Or you want to set it to none if you don't want to break on any error. Likewise, you also have a break on record write. So this specifies what to do when a record is modified. You can also set it to all, so it will always break when a record is modified. You can set it to exclude temporary, so it will ignore temporary records. And you can also set it to none, so it won't break when a record is modified. Okay, so let's see this in action for implicit breakpoints. So when I break on a record, to break on when a record is modified. So I'm gonna go back into my web client here. Gonna first deattach. Okay, and I'm gonna try out. Gonna go to my items list. I'm gonna try a new action that I added for the item card. But first, I'm going to attach to that session because I don't want to break on all the records that precede that. So I want to attach exactly when I execute that action. So I'm going to go back to my launch configuration. I'm going to break on here. I'm going to go for all. And then I'm going to launch that configuration again. Oops, and I have to, of course, I have a new session, so I need to make sure that I update that. Because otherwise it will fail. So I'll try that again. Yes, so now I'm attached. And then I can try that action. And then I will see that I will hit on those when a record is modified. All right, so that was it for debugging in EL extension. And now Thomas will show you also more cool things you can do with EL extension.
All right, there we are. I can hear myself now. Perfect. So yes, we just saw Blanca how she was able to attach the debugger to her current session. But we are working on a slice here, so we can actually improve this experience right here. So that's what I want to demo for you right now. So what we have is that we can go in to Let me load. So in here, I have my own server running. And the first thing we have done is that I want to learn more about the customer. So I go into help and support, and I go into inspect the page. And now I can read all about all the table fields and extensions that are contributing to this page right here. But what I'm really want to see as a developer is probably the source code behind this page right here. So we have added now a link you can click here, and just make sure it's the right one it hits. When we click on this one, it sends you directly to the page that you're looking at. So no more looking around for the right name and the right ID and whatnot. So given this object right here, we can now go in, and let's say I want to debug the unopened page on this page right here. So next thing I would normally do is I would go into my launch.json here, and I would start typing in my attached configuration right here. But here is the second half of where this new feature will come in. So we'll close down the page inspector, and we will move back to the help and support page. And normally we'll go down, copy the session ID, but here we have added a new link for attaching the debugger. So now we click here on this link that sends us back to the Visual Studio Code instance again. And now we'll ask you, because I'm in a sandbox environment, what kind of debugging do I want to do? For this one, I want to do regular debugging. So it will create me the launch configuration that matches my choice here and with all the parameters I have. And it will then start up the debugger with this configuration right here. So already right now, you can see I've attached successfully to the current session right here. And if I then move back into my tenant here, and then I go in and activate the unopened page, get the spinner, because now it actually hit the breakpoints, and we are in full swing with our debugging session right here. So this is coming sometime in the future here, but it should be coming in the next major. So that was it for our new feature that will make it easier to debug. Next up is that we can't really not talk about the Explorer. It's the tool that we developed for you to easily get an overview of all of the objects, events, enums, whatever you have in your projects, and all of the dependencies. So if we go back in here, then I want to learn more about this price assets system here. So I can go in, I can find my objects, and I can quickly go and see the source codes. I see there's this wonderful enum right here. I want to extend the type, so I can go back, go into extendable enum, and I can find my enum in here, and from here I can see, okay, I know it's an extendable enum that implements an interface, but what is the interface that it's implementing? Okay, so now I have the name of this interface right here. And then I can go back, and I can get started on implementing my own code unit here for this interface right here. So this is one of the common use cases we see for the Explorer, where you want to discover and understand the code you're working with. But I won't bore you anymore with it. We've already seen a few demos of it. If you want to know more about it, we just had the watch new just for the sake of the recording. And we also had a great demo of it in the keynote. So let's just move on from now. Instead, what I want to focus on is some of these productivity boosters that we have put into the products and that might not be known by everybody. So here we go through some of them. So again, code actions, we have seen them before. But they're just so great. It allows us have an easier uptake of all of the features that we are doing. So you can quickly get going and you can utilize some of the new work that we are doing here. So for instance, for code units here, where you have interfaces that you want to implement, we already got it covered. We have a code action to say, having to implement all of these functions right here is some work. And here the compiler can just help you with it. So it will generate you all of the functions that you need to implement for this given interface right here. Yeah, you already seen some of the code actions. Here we have a list of the ones we have. They're split into two categories. Either we fix diagnostics, errors and warnings for you, or we are fixing up code from refactoring point of view. For instance, when we moved from the previous promoted actions properties now into the new modern action bar, those are the kind of refactorings you can do with code action so far. And there'll be more coming. I can already promise that. So the next thing I want to show is code implementation. Stefan already showed you that if you have an interface and you want to understand who actually already implements this one, you can go in, you can right-click, and you can see all these code units right here. But another thing you can do as well is there might be big code units in there. So let's just go directly on the procedure and ask for the implementation of this procedure right here. And then we can go in and navigate directly to the given feature, the given procedure. So these small improvements, so you can easily navigate everything here. Next up is the type hierarchy. So this is also kind of interesting in the sense that the AL language is not really an object-oriented language. So when you see type hierarchy highlighted in Visual Studio Code from other languages such as JavaScript or C# or what have you, then you see a way bigger tree of this. But with the type hierarchy in AL, you still get a good overview about all of your extension objects for a given object right here. So let me show you how that looks like. If we go back, I here already prepared a page extension, and I have the page right up here, and I want to see, well, I added my trigger in here, but what else might it be there? I'll say show type hierarchy, and now it will give me the list of all the other page extensions, and I can then navigate to them and see what kind of modifications are they doing. So this can also be quite helpful to understand where all the changes to my page or my table or my enums coming from. Next up is semantic code coloring, and this one is a dear to me. So when we're looking at code such as this one, you see there's a lot of, we have basically 3 colors to work with right here, and a lot of white text for all of the identifiers. So we can do better here. Oh, it's in here. So right now, we also see that actually the current set of way of coloring here is based on a system called TextMates. It's basically a set of regex rules that will just match up on the given text that we have right here. So with these semantic highlighting here, we can actually do semantic coloring of all the words and the tokens right here. So it will use the compiler to tell what are we actually looking at here. So let me enable that, and we can have a look at this. So we go into settings, and we see, we can enable it right here, and we move back in, and all of a sudden, way more colors. And if we go back to our page extension, we see that the text, for instance, now has a different color, and we can know the difference for it. We can also see that instances like this, where you have a local variable of the name, company name, and you also have the built-in function of the same name, shows that what's going on right here. But some of you might not actually like the way that we color things, or might want to highlight certain special scenarios right here. So what you can do is you can either go in and make your own theme and set up all of that, or there is a more lightweight way of going about this. So you can go into your settings, and you can make a custom set of rules here. So for this one, I'm saying for the semantic tokens of parameters, I want to give them an italic underline font style. For the built-in functions, I want to color them green, And for these text-made tokens right here, I want to color them of the type keyword operator. I want to color them red. And now some of you might ask, well, but how do I know all of this? How can I discover these tokens right here? So we will go in, and there's a wonderful tool provided by Visual Studio Code to discover all of these classifications we have done. So as soon as we open that one up, you can click around and you can see for this word right here, we have the semantic token of being a parameter, and then that means that we are calling it in a certain way. But we already see right here that the rules that we put in through the settings is applying now, and we get the italic underline for the parameters. The built-in functions are now green, and we can recognize them from the other ones that are just yellow here. And all of our operators turned red. So you can do whatever your heart desires here. All right, and that was it for coloring. The next thing is sticky scroll. This was also a interesting feature that the VS Code team added that we made available through our language as well. And the benefit of sticky scroll here is that in AL you have a lot of nested elements. So when you go in and you see a page, for instance, you see there's a page and it has a layout, it has the area, it goes into a group, and it's the indentation just go on and go on and go on. And sometimes it can be hard to keep track of where are you. So for this one, we can go in and we can say, well, let's enable sticky scroll through this setting right here. And let's go back to our page. And now as soon as we start to scroll down, we see that the first line sticks to the top of the document right here. And then as we continue down, more and more lines starts to stick because the scope we are narrowing in on. And of course, as you go down, oh, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, you get the point. It follows your scope. One additional thing I would like to add is the default setting is only set to 5 indentations or 5 levels. And as soon as you get the first action in, you're already above 5. So for this one, I increased it to 10. And that's how you can get into like the field level. So that's what we have for sticky scroll right here. And the last one I want to show you is global launch configurations. So for those of you who might be trying out a lot of different ideas, creating a lot of apps, having to start up new projects all the time, this might be the way you want to go, because then you don't have to create all your launch configurations for every single project. You can store them between every single project. So how do we do this? Well, we can store them in settings. And for now, this is just the settings for the projects. But we've already seen from Blanca earlier that you can also store them in the workspace or in the user. And how do you then specify this launch configuration? Well, you go in and you say, I want to have a launch setting right here. It has a certain set of configurations. And then you have the same object right here as you would specify in your launch configuration. It's just a copy paste of it. So here it's just a launch to my sandbox. But it might as well be your Docker or what have you. And with that, that was all I've had for showing off some of the interesting features that we have added to our AL language extension for Visual Studio Code. If you want to learn more, you saw the slides before, but we also have the GitHub page for our extension where you can submit all your issues or what might have you, small tweaks. But that was it from me. So if you have any more questions, time for that. Yeah. 9 minutes. All right.
So the,
oh.
Yeah. Is there? Okay.
You have one question? Yeah. No.
Hello? I think this is working. No.
The green one is working. The green one is working.
Let's try the green one then again. Yeah.
Can you hear? Yeah. The features you were showing for debugging before, the new features, are they available both for cloud and for on-prem, or only for cloud?
They are available in both scenarios.
Yep.
No difference?
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? We also had one, we have one over there.
When using the code lens and we go through the Explorer to one of the base apps, can we see all the references of, example, the quantity on sales lines in our dependent apps and our own apps?
Through the Explorer or?
Well, when you dive down through the Explorer to the AL file that it shows, then you go to a field, let's say quantity on sales line, and right-click and say find all references, like you did with implementations. Are there any way of doing that? Is it on the roadmap?
So you can get all your implementations for interfaces, but if you want to have references, you have to use the current find references in the code. There is no added capability in the Explorer for finding references. You have to.
No, I know, but in general, let's say you have a dependency on base app, as you usually do, and you go down to it and you take the quantity, and you just want to see where is that quantity used in both the base app that you're dependent on and your own app, etc. Can you do that? I know I can do it with my own field in my table extension, but not my dependent apps.
Yeah. So you hit on a limitation, I believe. So you cannot do that for like what we call like reference files. So files that you don't have in your own project right now. You can only navigate to them at the point. It's a wonderful idea, and yeah, go on BC Ideas and vote it up, because it is a no limitation right now that you cannot ask for references of your references.
Okay.
That's. And do we have any more questions? We have one over here. Wonderful.
Not directly related, but is it possible in the near future that we get a fix for the slash, that we can debug again objects with slash in their name?
Absolutely.
Because that's very frustrating, most post routines and GL account.
Yeah, so that is something that we are working on, and you should see a fix. I can't promise you like tomorrow, but yes, there should be a fix coming out. Oh, we have one over here.
Thank you. I was wondering, you showed that it is possible to have multiple sources of your app files. Is it also possible to have a destination for your compiled app? So normally I have to search in the folder for my compiled app to be able to share it or to upload it somewhere. And I want to have a release folder to...
Yeah, so you want to specify in VStudio
Yeah,
code.
I want to specify where to store the app file, or where to... the destination, build destination, if you want to.
Yeah, I believe right now it's only possible through the command line interface.
Yeah.
Where you can specify it. Again, wonderful idea. I mean, shouldn't be something we could idea. So. Yeah. How do we look into? So yeah, I think that's it. If there's no more questions, hard to see. Nope. Well, if you have any more questions, come along at the Microsoft booth on the allocated times right here, and that's it for us. Thank you so much.